So, two former Prime Ministers for the price of one there. We're joined now by the DUP's Deputy Leader, Nigel Dodds. He's backing a vote to leave, and by the Shadow Northern Ireland Secretary, Vernon Coker. He's supporting a vote to remain. Welcome to you both. Mr Dodds, let me come to you first. Tony Blair says Northern Ireland's stability, it rests on carefully constructed foundations, includes that we are members of the EU and that the Republic is members of the EU as well. Why would you want to shake these foundations?
Well, can I say, of all the sort of claims that have been made about the threats to the UK and the constituent parts of the UK if we were to leave the EU, I find this claim that Northern Ireland's political instability is going to be undermined one of the most depressing and disappointing.
Why is that?
Well, because I think John Major and Tony Blair have made an enormous contribution to the Northern Ireland peace process over the years. I mean, they carried a very heavy burden, and, you know, wasn't everything that I agreed with that they did, but they did an enormous amount in moving the Northern Ireland political situation forward. And I think for them to come and to use their authority to try to promote an argument, and there are many arguments that could be made, but this argument that they're promoting about the threat to the political and peace process is one that is simply scaremongering and very irresponsible.
Well, do you believe that the peace process, I was going to say unravel, that may be taken too far, but would the peace process be in more danger if we were to leave the EU?
I think the first thing to say, I don't think it would unravel, Andrew, and I think that would be going far too far. I don't think that, and I'd also say I don't believe we're going to go back to the bad old days of the past. But I do think
in or out,
in or out, absolutely.
So what is the case then?
But I do think that much of the initial Good Friday Agreement and the subsequent agreements rest on the assumption that both Ireland and Britain are within the EU, the North-South bodies, the East-West bodies, all of those rest on that. And I think it does raise the issue of what will be the consequences, not just for Northern Ireland, but the UK as a whole, from leaving the EU.
But give me a consequence and then we'll put it to Mr Dodds.
I mean, for example, what happens with Scotland, which is the broader issue that they're also...
Well, let's not go there, let's stick with Ireland today.
Northern Ireland, but also in terms of the border, what happens with the border, where it becomes a border between the UK and the EU, what are the consequences for that?
All right, Mr Dodds, with it's an open border at the moment.
Yeah.
Would it remain or not?
It would, because the Common Travel Area, which is the arrangement whereby people can move freely between the Irish Republic and the United Kingdom, has been in place since 1923. We've had almost 100 years of free move, predated the European Union. It will outlast the European Union if we leave. And it's very, very clear. Even the Dan Mulhall, the Irish ambassador to London, said last year it would remain in place. So, look, I don't understand why they can make all sorts of arguments on the economic front and all the rest of it. Why there's all this attempt to scaremonger and to unsettle people and destabilise the situation in Northern Ireland unnecessarily. Vernon talked there about the institutions of the Good Friday Agreement, the St Andrews Agreement and so on. We have people in the East-West institutions like the Isle of Man, the Channel Islands, for whom there is free movement, but they're not members of the EU. So this happens already in the context of East-West institutions set up under the Belfast Agreement. So I think that the two former Prime Ministers that are in Northern Ireland today, with the greatest respect to them and having paid tribute to the work that they've done, should not be going round engaged in this kind of scaremongering. It really devalues their reputation, does no good at all, and I think we should be concentrating on the really big issues, which is how much better it is economically in terms of getting control over our borders, control over our laws, control over our money, for the UK as a whole to be outside the European Union.
What do you say then that the border wouldn't change? I mean, it's been around, the open border, since the early 1920s. Of course, there was then a big chunk when, as things grew, we were both inside the EU as things changed. So in what way what would the risk with the border be?
Well, I think the first point to make, Andrew, is first of all, when Ireland and Britain were outside of the EU, they were both outside and they both joined at the same time, so they've both been in the EU. So the common travel arrangement has always worked when it's been synonymous, the arrangements between Ireland and Britain. But the danger is, and just talking, Nigel moved on to trade, what would the consequences of being outside of the EU be for goods that move backwards and forwards. And it's not just me saying that, or indeed John Major and Tony Blair. We've had the Treasury, the Chancellor saying that. We've had the Northern Ireland Office itself pointing that there could be consequences. And just recently, the Home Office writing to the Newry Chamber of Commerce saying that there may be implications for the border.
Well, let me ask about that on the trade side. Let's assume that the common free movement still survives. As you say, it's been around for a long time. But if we're outside the single market, which is a possibility that some on your side have said that we may not get in, stay, Ireland certainly stays in the single market. There's no doubt about that. There could be tariff barriers both ways, big or small, we don't know. You would have to have something on the border then, if there were tariff barriers.
In the event that you outline, and I mean, there's all sorts of arguments about our access to the single market and trade deals and all this, so I don't accept the underlying premise, but if you were in that scenario, the idea that you'd have to have physical barriers along the border is nonsense, given the sort of electronic and digital arrangements that can be made now. We don't have that kind of arrangement between Sweden and Norway and in other countries where there's a border.
No, but for most things that are being traded, Norway is in the single market, and Norway has free movement of people.
Yes, but I'm simply making the point: you do not need a hard border in order to do that kind of have that kind of arrangement. The other thing I would say is, in terms of Northern Ireland, and Vernon will remember the argument well, when we were urged to join the single currency. We were told that for decades the Irish Republic and Northern Ireland and the rest of the United Kingdom parity in terms of the currency, with the Irish pound linked inextricably to the British pound. All sorts of dire predictions that this would disrupt trade. The Newry Chamber of Commerce and others were saying this would wipe us out in terms of Northern Ireland. Imagine having to change your currency at the Northern Ireland border. None of this happened.
All right,
People
let me get
sensible arrangements to deal with the fact.
let Mr. Coker. Let me have Mr. Coker.
Well, the government, the UK government at the time took the decision that it wouldn't be in the interests of Northern Ireland or any other part of the UK to join the euro, and that has been
but
proved to be
despite the same people are telling us now to stay inside the EU, telling us there'll be dire consequences.
But Nigel, you make a judgment on all of the evidence that you get, and so on and so forth.
And you go by people's record and how they got it right last time.
Well, sometimes, but you take a balanced view on the evidence that comes before you. And as I say, it's not only been myself, it's been the Chancellor, it's been the Home Office, as well as the Northern Ireland Office
Tony Blair,
itself.
who's in Northern Ireland today and was your former leader, is the same man who was telling us about joining the single currency. He was held back by Gordon Brown, thankfully, at the end of the day. But he wanted to join the European currency. He's now telling people in Northern Ireland you should stay in the EU in terms of your safety and all the rest of it.
We'll see.
I don't think people are going to take any lessons from Northern Ireland.
Well, I think they will from Tony Blair.
Very well. They may take some lessons from Andrew Roberts because, as a historian, you follow, you know a lot about Irish history. What's your view on this?
My view is that the Southern Irish have such enormous trade connections with Northern Ireland that they would not want to cause any trouble at all, whatever Brussels wanted. And I'm thrilled as an outer that Tony Blair is for the In campaign. He's the most unpopular politician.
Not in Northern Ireland.
And also, John Major, whenever he talks about Europe, he reminds us of the 4 billion we lost in the ERM debacle and Maastricht and all of the rest of it. So please keep going, guys.
Just a bit of crystal ball here. I'm told that there is a clear majority, let me use old-fashioned terms here, a clear majority in the Protestant community for leave, but an overwhelming majority in the Catholic community for stay. Is that broadly right?
I prefer to talk about unions.
You know what I mean. You get what I'm saying.
Communities, because there are many unionists
So
now
is
who
that
are
right,
Roman
though?
Catholics. In fact, I think most unionists, broadly speaking, will be for leave, and I think you're right about the overwhelming desire among nationalists, not least because Dublin is saying it's in their interests. But broadly speaking, that's probably correct. But I think we're gaining all the time on the leave.
Okay, we shall see.
We'll see.
Very well. We shall see indeed.
We shall see, Nigel.
Thank you both.